In the summer of 1994, 4 teens entered an abandoned building in Gravesend, Brooklyn. It was the last time they would be seen alive. With few clues and no witnesses, the case went cold. But for Anthony Brewer, the brother of one of the victims, the search never stopped. In 2024, he acquired evidence from the police that contained DNA samples that didn't match the teens. That discovery put his life and the life of his family in grave danger. Goosebumps, The Vanishing. All episodes now available on Disney Plus and Hulu on disneyplus.disney.com. Rated TV 14LB.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals participating in the show. All persons described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions along with adult language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Some murders shake the world to its core. Some mysteries never unravel. And some tragedies leave us asking one question: how could this happen? From mass killings that leave entire communities in shock, to unsolved disappearances that haunt families for decades, you'll hear it all on Season 6 of 90s Crime Time. In each episode of this season, we'll dig deep into some of the deadliest massacres to the coldest, calculated murders, and you'll find out what made these cases some of the most chilling cases of the decade, even if you haven't heard of some of them. From small towns to busy cities, from quiet nights to violent acts that shatter peace, 90s Crime Time will bring you stories of murder and mystery. So set your calendars and tune in on January 9th, 2024 to the Season 6 premiere of 90s Crime Time. And I'll see you then.
Rico Harris slipped out of his mother's duplex on a one-way street in Alhambra, California, and into the darkness. The big man with the "Ballin' for Life" and a basketball tattooed on his left arm got into his black Nissan Maxima. Having been awake for almost 30 hours, his mother pleaded for him to rest at her house before heading back to Seattle. That would be the last time anyone saw him. You're listening to the Mysterious Brews podcast, and tonight we bring you the case of Rico Harris.
Developing news tonight.
Omar Harris,
A former Harlem Globetrotter vanished
Here while on a road trip to Seattle.
Harris remains unaccounted
They are hoping that anyone with information calls police.
People come up missing all the time, but not many are 6'9" and 300 pounds, as in the case with my ex-college basketball teammate, Rico Harris. Rico and I played together back in college at Cal State Northridge during my sophomore year. Rico was a basketball star on all levels.
Welcome to a deep, dark, dank, moist basement somewhere in the bowels of Georgia. Well, as you can tell from the opening, Coach is under the weather, so you got the one and only sultry sounds of Arlo. Before we get into the case, let's welcome our newest patrons. That would be Miss Anne-Marie Riley and Carrie Baranov. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So unless you've been living under a rock, the South has gotten its first snowfall, and I do believe that is probably what is keeping Coach under the weather. He got his wish for a snow day and probably played too much in the snow. So we are going to trudge along without him, unfortunately. Sounds like he has a mouthful of marbles and cotton stuck up his nose. So it would not have been very, very ear-pleasing. But we do miss him. But the show must go on, ladies and gentlemen. The show must go on. So let's get into it. Tonight we are talking about the disappearance of Rico Harris. Now, Rico was born on May 19th, 1977 to parents Henry Harris and Margaret Fernandez in Los Angeles, California. After moving to Oregon for a short time due to Henry's new job, the family moved back to Los Angeles. There, they would raise 3 additional children. Unfortunately, like we see in a lot of our cases, we cover Rico's formative years, along with his brothers and sisters, were plagued by violent and abusive tendencies from the hands of their father. Unfortunately, Rico bore the brunt of most of these, and he was Henry's favorite target. Rico would constantly seek his father's approval in his teenage years to little avail. Eventually, enough was enough, and Margaret moved out, took her children with her to Alhambra, California. There, Rico, being the eldest, started taking it upon himself to help support his mother and his siblings. While Margaret would work full-time, Rico would play babysitter. Now, Rico was a big boy, and by the time he was 16, he stood at 6 foot 8 inches tall and weighed 250 pounds. His parents had always encouraged him to use his big body in sports, but Rico had other plans and decided to pursue acting at 15. To improve his chances of getting an acting gig, he enrolled in Hollywood High School. Now, the drive from Alhambra to Hollywood High School was only 16 miles, but you had to go through downtown LA, and those 16 miles took Rico and his mother at least an hour to commute one way. So after a year of doing this, Rico realized he was not an actor and he was born to play basketball. So he uses his father's address to attend Temple City High School. Now that high school was just 5 miles in the opposite direction from his mom's house. And I guess he had to use his father's address to be in district. Now, it didn't take long for Rico to own the basketball court. High school saw him dominating his opponents and entertaining the crowds with his fiery basketball style. He transformed a once dormant high school team into one of the powerhouse programs in the area. College coaches from all over the country came to see Rico play and equated him to a young Magic Johnson with his command of the offense and his ability to break through a double team. Off the court, he was an introverted teenager without a lot of academic prowess. Now, that is until he met a girl, and we all know how that works out. Her family helped him achieve higher grades in school, and this helped Rico become even more successful on the court. During his senior year, he would average 28 points, 15 rebounds, and was one of the top basketball recruits in the Western United States, along with the likes of Jason Terry and Paul Pierce. Now, it was not all rainbows and unicorns for Rico because, unfortunately, he failed to receive the minimum score on the SAT to get into a Division I school. So his scholarship offers from some of the top universities, such as UCLA, started to disappear, and Rico ended up at Arizona State. There, he would have to take classes to regain, or it says regain his eligibility, but to be honest with you, sounds like he had to get in there and get his grades up and prove that he could take on college before they would let him be eligible to play sports. So for the first time in his life, Rico was away from his friends and his close family. Now, this caused a lot of problems with his classes and his social life. In March 1996, he was accused of unlawful imprisonment along with 2 other teammates. Eventually, these charges were dropped, but Rico was told he had to sit out his second year of basketball in order to clean up his image. Refusing to sacrifice another year of eligibility, Rico transfers to Los Angeles City College. There, he was able to play basketball immediately and let his presence be known. He guided the Los Angeles City College teams to a state title and most valuable player honor. Unfortunately, by his second year at the City College, Rico found himself on the verge of academic probation. He was also spiraling downward socially with an unhealthy lifestyle of constant alcohol consumption. All of that said, Rico was still performing at a high level on the basketball court. He and his girlfriend would wind up calling it quits, and this forced Rico to acknowledge his deteriorating emotional health. He shut down his recruitment from other colleges, telling his friends and family that he felt that they only wanted his basketball skills and would not help him develop as a person. The only move left was to declare for the NBA draft. Once again, Rico's self-sabotaging ways started to derail this plan, and he started postponing all of these workouts for these NBA teams just so that he could remain close to home. As we all know, actions have consequences, so Rico would wind up withdrawing his name from the draft, and at the same time, he would decline various East Coast offers to play for another Division I college basketball team. After some time, he did wind up transferring to Cal State Northridge, and those closest to Rico thought it was a poor choice for his future. And we all know what the naysayers do. They say nay. But this time, they were correct. That summer between semesters, Rico attempted to make peace with his estranged father, Henry, but Henry, being Henry, started projecting, and that went south quickly. Rico would continue to spiral out of control both socially and emotionally. Losing focus and interest in a pro career, his one season at Cal State Northridge was lackluster to say the least. Out of eligibility to play college ball, Rico set his sights on semi-professional basketball to keep his NBA dream alive. He played in San Diego, St. Louis, and some other teams before deciding that he would give the Harlem Globetrotters a try. As Rico's luck continued to be bad, he got into an altercation in South Los Angeles where he was hit in the back of his head with a baseball bat. He would survive the fight, but suffered balance issues and headaches as a result. Coupled with his less than stellar off-the-court activities, this basically ended his career in basketball just 1 month into making the Harlem Globetrotters. After moving back to Alhambra with his mom and his siblings, Rico would battle addiction for the next 7 years. It began with alcohol and quickly turned into a heroin addiction. Coupled with meth and cocaine, he was out of control. Now, in an odd twist of fate, all of Rico's siblings were suffering from some sort of substance abuse, and their mother, Margaret, did everything she could to help them excise those demons. After Rico turned 30 in 2007, he finally entered rehab. The program lasted longer than was expected, but he stuck with it and would eventually kick his addictions. In 2012, he met a young lady named Jennifer Song, a Seattle insurance broker, and the two became romantically involved. Throughout the next couple of years, Jennifer and Rico would grow close, with Rico eventually moving to Seattle permanently. There, the couple began planning a life together, talking about having children and growing old together. Looking back, Jennifer would state that in early September of 2014, as her and Rico were building their relationship and talking about the future, she noticed something that was just not right with Rico. He began to act abnormally and started losing his sense of organization. After some questioning him pretty persistently, he reveals to her that summer he had kind of relapsed and started drinking again. As he described it to Jennifer, it hadn't turned back into a full-blown habit, but Jennifer was shocked by this revelation. Rico's relapse also was confirmed by one of his longtime friends, David Lara. Now, David and Rico had kind of caught back up and started being friends again around the same time that summer. Now, later in September, despite confessing to Jennifer that he was drinking again, Rico and her settled on taking their relationship further and moved in together in Seattle. Now, this was a huge step for Rico because he had previously struggled when he was away from his hometown of Los Angeles and, more importantly, from his mom and his siblings. Now, Jennifer and Rico would have intense conversations about marriage and having children. Despite all of this, Rico still felt insecure about being in Seattle. And it takes him almost a month to unpack his items, saying that he, quote, felt awkward making himself at home in a living space that wasn't his, end quote. Jennifer later says it was Rico's sensitive nature and a will to provide for his family that fed his insecurity and not second thoughts or laziness. Sometime in this time frame, they wind up getting engaged. And if you look into this case, she is referred to as his fiancée. I never could find a date, proposal, or any of that stuff. But if you do read some articles about the case, you will see her referred to as his fiancée. So by the first week of October, things are looking pretty good for Rico. He lands a job interview for a position as a property appraiser at a local real estate company. This promise sparks a sense of encouragement and a feeling of joy, and Rico finally unpacks his things in Jennifer's house. The happy vibes unfortunately do not last, and on October 8th, 2014, Rico tells Jennifer he's going out for the day, kind of just to find himself, get out of the house, nervous energy kind of stuff, which is abnormal. But Jennifer doesn't really think twice about it, kisses him, and says goodbye. When Jennifer hadn't heard from him and calls Rico later that evening, he tells her that he's actually on his way to Los Angeles to visit his family. Rico explains that he wants some closure from his tumultuous past and is seeking some trust with his mother again regarding their relationship and his future plans. Jennifer is shocked because from what I could see, this is about 18 hours. Looking at the old Google Maps, you can go, depending on traffic now, y'all know how California traffic is, but you can get there supposedly just barely over 17 hours. You could get there as long as 19 hours and 23 minutes. Regardless, you're looking at about a 1,150 to 1,240 mile trip. This is not something you, at the spur of the moment, you're like, I think I'm going to go see mom. No, this is something that he was thinking about for a while. So Jennifer understands that he means well and he's looking to get some closure and supports this decision. While shocked, she does know that he needs to do this for them to move on. She also remembers Rico sounding excited and his head seemed to be in the right space. So Rico actually arrives in Alhambra the next day on October 9th. His mother, Margaret, states his excitement about the recent changes and optimism about his new life were palpable. However, she also suspects that he had been drinking or was under the influence of something. That evening, Rico leaves his mom's house and has dinner with one of his younger brothers. He buys his brother a new cell phone, and the two spend the evening eating, hanging out, chatting it up. After dinner, Rico heads back to his mom's house to have a heart-to-heart conversation, seeking closure from his childhood and everything that had happened to him when he was younger. Now, the conversation does not last long, and Margaret later claims she felt Rico, quote, hadn't taken from the conversation what he had hoped for in terms of emotional revelation, end quote. I don't know what he was looking for, but Mom is basically saying when she's interviewed later that sounds like she laid out the facts and he just didn't think it went down that way. So as the clock strikes midnight on Friday, October 10th, Rico decided to head back to Seattle rather than spending the night like he had originally planned at his mother's house, which leads you to believe he was pissed and he just needed to get out of there. Again, this is an 18-hour drive. You're leaving at midnight. You're not getting there. You know, it's going to be, you're going to leave when it's dark and you're going to get there when it's dark. So he tells his mom that he needs to leave so that he can have some extra time to prepare for his interview. He takes a few extra personal belongings from his mother's house and hits the road headed back to Seattle. At around 1 a.m., Rico calls his mother to explain his rash decision. Now, Mom recalls that Rico says something along the lines of, quote, "I have these things that I need to do," end quote. So right after talking to his mom, Rico calls Jennifer, the girlfriend. Once again, she's surprised with his plan to drive through the night to get back to her. So the two talk for about 3 or 4 hours. And throughout this conversation, Jennifer keeps trying to tell Rico, find a motel, sleep for a couple of hours. You're running on 40 hours plus with no sleep. Rico keeps saying, no, I'm fine. And finally, after her female persuasion kicks in, Rico submits and tells her that he is going to head to the nearby mountains for a quick nap. Jennifer suggests an alternative, reminding him he'd have no cell service in the area, as well as having to negotiate those dark and winding mountainous roads in the middle of the night. Running on no sleep would be extremely dangerous. So the two end their call with Rico standing firm that he's going to keep driving. So at 8 a.m. on October 10th, Rico receives a call from Jennifer after she had slept for a few hours. Rico tells her that he's getting gas at a station near Sacramento in a town called Lodi, California, that is. She states that Rico sounded extremely tired, and roughly an hour later, he gets another call, but this time it's his mom asking how far he is into his trip. Rico tells his mom that he's exhausted and claims he's going to find somewhere to eat and get some rest. Throughout the morning, both Jennifer and Mom, Margaret, would make multiple calls to Rico to check in on him, but Rico never picked up. After a few unsuccessful phone calls, Jennifer sends him a text. At 10:44 a.m., Rico finally responds to her text and says he's doing well, but gives no details as to where he is and what he's doing. This would be the last official contact anyone had with Rico Harris. As morning turns to afternoon, Jennifer tries to let Rico's weird behavior kind of go away, but really she's trying to let him rest without bombarding him with texts or calls. Eventually, curiosity kills the cat, and she calls him anyway. Still no answer. She tells herself he must be in the mountain region of California, everything must be fine, and he just probably doesn't have any cell service. Between 7 and 8 p.m., Jennifer's concerns ratchet up a notch, and she's like, hell with this, I'm calling Mom. And she says that when she talks to Mom, Margaret is surprisingly calm and guesses that Rico is just, quote, operating on his own free will, end quote. Not uncommon for him, sweetie. That's actual verbatim. I got the transcripts. I'm just joking. I have no idea. But in the article, it did say he was operating on his own will, according to Mom. Sometime before midnight, Rico records himself singing along to music in his parked car, but the recording appears to be unintentional. Now, this is not a audio recording. This is an actual video. You can see him and hear him throwing around various CDs in his car, and when these video clips are found later, they are timestamped as being of the evening of October the 10th, confirming that he was alive and functioning at that time. At 11:15 p.m., however, His cell phone turns off, and no one knows whether Rico did it intentionally or his battery died. So now we get to the weekend of October the 11th and the 12th, and that weekend passes with Rico never returning any calls or making it back to Seattle. Despite not hearing from him, Jennifer and Margaret do not report Rico missing. Their reasoning was that one time he headed to San Diego without telling anybody. I have no idea. I mean, on Monday, October the 13th, a YOLO county deputy sheriff is making a routine check of an isolated rest area parking lot at Rumsey Canyon in, of all places, wait for it, Rumsey, California. This is located along California State Route 16. The deputy finds a black Nissan Maxima off to the side in a dirt lot with no one in the vicinity. But he doesn't find it suspicious and moves on. The following day, on Tuesday, October the 14th, the same YOLO County deputy, doing the same patrol, comes back to the lot and finds the Nissan in the same spot. This time, he runs the license plate, and it comes back to being registered to the one and only Rico Harris. Now, the address is still showing his mom's home in Alhambra. So the Yolo County Sheriff's Office calls Margaret to inform her they found Rico's car, but there's no one inside and they did not see anybody in the general vicinity. She, in turn, calls Jennifer, and both of them are trying to make sense of what they say is a bizarre, twisted dream. Margaret officially files a missing persons report with the Alhambra Police Department, and the law enforcement open up an investigation. Over the next week or so, police put together a massive network of searches and rescue personnel. Helicopters with thermographic cameras fly over the surrounding area. All-terrain vehicles are assigned for the more mountainous search zones, and even cadaver dogs are brought in to see if they could find any scent of Rico. Overall, the crews covered a 5-mile radius from the parking lot and a 27-mile stretch of Rumsey Canyon along Route 16. The search yields very little clues, besides unidentified footprints in the dirt alongside the road. Now, using cell phone data, the police interview residents of nearby locals and receive some encouraging sightings that date back to that Sunday, October the 12th. But there's nothing concrete. So on October the 19th, investigators receive another tip about the sighting of a large man walking along Route 16, and more shoe imprints are found in that area. However, the location of the previous footprints compared to the October 19th clues lead police to conclude Rico had left his car at Rumsey Canyon and started walking along the Cache Creek and then returned to the original spot for some unknown reason. Now, a few days later, on October the 22nd, the search is scaled back and eventually it fades away. In the middle of November of 2014, search and rescue divers returned to deeper sections of the surrounding bodies of water to once again search. But just like their initial searches, they find nothing out of the ordinary. We are only left with what was found in those few weeks of the investigation, making this entire ordeal extremely strange, scattered with, very small clues and a lot of dead ends. The most tangible clues were discovered in the first week or so, but none were more, they would keep saying the word perplexing, but I say it's just weird as hell. They find a backpack and a cell phone on a guardrail along Route 16 near Cache Creek. Now, police basically access the phone records from this cell phone. They also get the data pings, and it leads them to the Redwood Valley area in Northern California. And that's approximately 70 miles northwest from where Rico's vehicle was originally found. Now, investigators do their due diligence and called as many residents as they could in that surrounding area, leaving messages or voicemails asking for tips. And now it didn't take long for this to actually work, and it produced some results. Lead investigator Dean Nyland received a phone call from a Redwood Valley man who claimed to have found items belonging to Rico. Police immediately responded to this tip and learned the Redwood man indeed had a black backpack owned by Rico Harris. Inside this backpack were jumper cables and a cell phone. The man explained he and his wife and their grandson were driving along Route 16 when the grandson spotted this backpack on the curb of the highway. The man pulls over, and the grandmother and the grandson get out. All three start shouting into the wilderness, hoping to make contact with the bag's owner. Now, I know this is not a laughing matter, but wouldn't it have been funny if this was not Rico's bag and some poor bastard had been hiking and he had just set his backpack down? He went over there to take a shit. He's like, God almighty, would y'all shut up? Yes, it's my backpack. I've just got to pinch one off. Don't ask me why I find that funny, but I do. So getting back to it. They're shouting nothing. So they actually look down and kind of walk down to the creek. Don't find anybody, don't see anybody, don't see any signs of anybody. And so they check the bag looking for an ID. And all they found were the jumper cables and the phone. So they took it with them in hopes of charging the phone and contacting whoever owned it. Now, law enforcement quickly assumed that it was Rico's, not only because the bag was like a purse, according to Jennifer, who recognized it instantly, but it was also found only 1,500 feet from another sighting reported by a passerby earlier in the week. So you've got two people in the same area that have basically corroborated each other's story, and they don't know each other. Now, someone who has seen a large African-American man standing along the guardrail on Route 16 is not going to be mistaken for anyone else. And so investigators access the cell phone, comb through that information, and they actually come up with a crucial piece of evidence, helping them create a kind of timeline of Rico's last movements. So as we had discussed earlier, they find in that phone photo gallery, whatever you want to call it, those videos of Rico singing along to the music, totally unaware that he had pressed record. And along with the singing, they see that he's throwing CDs around and he's ripping up random papers and he's playing with the sunroof controls. All of these video clips were time-stamped the evening of October the 10th, which meant that Rico was alive that night and was probably the reason why the vehicle was out of gas and had a dead battery, because he had just basically was running on fumes, delusion. I don't know if I would say delusional, but he was sleep deprived. So he was not thinking straight. So also, I don't know how cold it gets up there. He could have been trying to keep the car running in for the heat. Now, the fact that he had tossed these CDs and ripped up these papers also helped investigators explain why they had originally thought that the car had been ransacked when they towed it into the station. Now, most importantly, however, the cell phone videos gave investigators a better idea about Rico's state of mind. The videos also coincided with the time he last made contact with his family. The fact that Rico recently relapsed with alcohol while in Alhambra was divulged to authorities. Now, having engaged in a difficult, emotionally draining conversation with his mother, combined with the fact that he had been up for what they finally estimated was 50 hours straight. He was extremely fragile when it came to his psyche. If you combine that with the possibility that he's relapsed, and it wasn't just alcohol that he relapsed with, you have a recipe for disaster. You also have to look back and combine Rico's uncertain behavior with his lifetime worth of personal struggles, and you could have had a, like I said, deadly combination of exhaustive paranoia, stress, and anxiety. Without a doubt, the backpack, the cell phone, and the other clues do show that Rico was not in the right state of mind. So now we get into theories, and the first and most popular theory is he kept, I guess, getting more and more tired and left himself open to the possibility of being the victim of foul play. Now, this theory originated with the Yolo County Sheriff's Department after his Maxima was found abandoned at first glance. Remember, they think, until they access his phone, that the car's been ransacked. So besides the mess of papers that he ripped up, the CDs thrown everywhere, there's bottles in the back seat. Investigators also noticed that Rico's wallet was left behind. When they go through the wallet and they confer with Jennifer, the only thing missing is his Discovery credit card. Now, as for the exterior, the car wasn't parked in any of the marked parking slots and had no gas, and the battery was dead. Now, police would theorize that after filling up with gas in Lodi, Rico took a wrong turn and headed northeast on Route 16. When he found the Cache Creek Park in Rumsey Canyon, he pulls off to rest, releases some pent-up energy, and eventually came in contact with a third party. Now, to explain the blemishes on the car, investigators assume the gas must have been siphoned out of it, which is a huge leap. This theory would also explain why a 6'8", 300-pound man could go easily unnoticed outside of just a few potential sightings. Men of that size typically don't go unnoticed unless another person or persons assist them, drive them away, or something even worse occurs. Someone of his size and stature is not going to go quietly, I guess is the best way to put it. The foul play considerations became much vaguer when Rico's backpack and footprints were discovered because the cell phone videos kind of clean up their original theory that he was the victim of foul play. So it is possible he ran out of gas and drained the battery from basically just listening to the radio and turning the heat or the air on. Now, normal cars can run through a fifth of their tank an hour just in the idle position. So it is possible that Rico let the car run through the night on the 10th and into the weekend on the 11th and 12th. That would also explain why the interior of the car was a mess, why the jumper cables were in his backpack. He was probably looking for someone to give him a jump, meaning that the footprints along Route 16 was him walking along the highway trying to flag down a passerby. There was also zero DNA evidence that would corroborate a third-party presence. So while Rico certainly didn't encounter foul play while in his car at Cache Creek, investigators kind of changed their theory and state that he was more than likely met with trouble after possibly hitchhiking along Route 16. They believe while walking and talking to anyone who would pull over to assist him, Rico was taken advantage of by someone or somebody with criminal intentions. It's likely that Rico was not in the right state of mind. Remember, he's been up for 50 plus hours, and he could have also been under the influence of something. So he could have easily been persuaded to leave his backpack behind, get in the vehicle under the guise of, yeah, man, I'll take you and get you some gas or whatever. plausible, but not likely, because it would take a very brazen individual to try to even think, much less actually abduct a man who has a physical advantage over probably 90% of the population. Not to mention, he didn't have any money on him. Remember, he's only got probably his Discovery credit card. Now, another angle of this theory was that without having any cash on him, and the fact that he had confessed that he had relapsed right before his disappearance, investigators theorized that he may have found someone who promised him some other illegal substances. And that would have persuaded him to get into a vehicle also. Who this could have been ranges from the potential killer to a drug dealer. But if he was abducted, it's someone out of their damn mind too. Because remember, he's 6'8", 300 pounds, and somehow he got into a Nissan Maxima. Unfortunately, there are hardly any leads associated with the foul play angles. Besides combing through people with criminal backgrounds in the area, nothing really panned out. Also, due to the vast population of Northern California and the Sacramento area, the possibilities are basically infinite when it comes to if he was abducted by someone. And I know that I made a big deal out of his size and stature, and I also understand that you can make most men of that size, of any size, move and do whatever you want to if you brandish a weapon. So I do understand that. I just don't think somebody would be that brazen to try to abduct a 6'8", 300-pound man, even with a gun as an equalizer. So the next theory is that Rico was wounded and taken by a wild animal or large predator. Again, any of these disappearance cases that we go over, that's one of the crowd favorites. Yes, Northern California has its fair share of wildlife that include rattlesnakes, mountain lions, and black bears. A rattlesnake could incapacitate Rico, but if he was bit by a snake, his body would have been picked up from the overhead helicopters or the numerous search parties, because he wouldn't have been able to get out of the general area real quick. Black bears usually steer clear of humans and would more than likely not mess with someone that's 6'8" and 300 pounds. The only other animal that actually makes a little bit of sense would be a mountain lion. Now, it would take a considerably large cat or a pack of cats to eventually kill him, but it would only take one to mortally wound him. Now, they are known to take their prey off from the kill site to feast upon it. So they could have taken him to a cave or, a rocky crag underhang thing, and that could explain why there was no body. What this theory does not explain is the fact that searchers did not find any signs of a struggle. There was no blood, no disturbances, and remember, the area is a very dry, arid, dusty canyon. Again, going back to the size of Rico, more than likely, wild animals are not going to mess with him. Now, if he did die somewhere in the wilderness, his body would not have simply just disappeared due to the timeline of the disappearance and the subsequent search for him. The third theory would involve a planned disappearance. Again, a crowd favorite. While it is plausible, it's highly unlikely. I swear we need to get someone on the podcast to go over what it would actually take to do this, or we may research it ourselves and actually just go over it. It's not quite as easy as everyone thinks it is. Now, this theory or conspiracy points to Rico's history with indecision and likely disappointment with the closure he sought when he spoke to his mother in Alhambra. Supporters of this theory suggest that Rico realized while he's driving back to Seattle to Jennifer that he no longer wanted a life like he was about to embark on. And his only thought was to just disappear and start over somewhere else. Now, this theory points to the one thing in our story, and that is the cell phone that he had bought his brother. The proponents of this theory state that it was not beyond the realm of possibility that Rico could have bought a second phone when he bought his brother's phone. And then during dinner, he explains to his brother what's going on and how he's just not happy and he doesn't want to hurt Jennifer. And after going and talking to his mom, and that doesn't go as well as he was hoping it goes, he decides to just basically leave that evening and uses, I want to get back and prepare for my interview as an excuse. On the way to Sacramento, Rico slowly does break off contact with his mom and Jennifer. I mean, that's undeniable. Whether that is purposeful, I don't think so. He also veers off course from I-5 to Seattle, instead driving east to Cache Creek. When he arrives there, he records himself. They say the recording is purposeful, and it is in order to appear distressed and potentially like he's out of his mind, and it's part of staging a kidnapping or robbery. So when the car finally runs out of gas and the battery goes dead, he basically just puts some shit in the backpack and his old phone, appearing to make it look like he's seeking help with the jumper cables being in there. Instead, when Rico is flagged down by a car trying to hitchhike, he purposefully leaves the bag, the old phone that he's been talking to his mom and Jennifer with, behind to create a diversion. And a lot of people go as far as to say whoever picked him up was in on his plan and are linked to this staged disappearance in his new life, some point, again, to his brother. I don't buy it. But in the end, if you really look into that last theory that he tried to start over, it's just rife with discrepancies. He had been adamant to everyone he knew that the opportunities in Seattle were his best opportunities to date. He had recently become a resident of Washington State, probably by getting his Washington State driver's license. He and Jennifer were talking about marriage, having kids, and he really wanted to settle in with Jennifer. Now, police kind of look into this missing Discovery credit card, and what they find is it was never accessed again after the 10th of October, meaning that if he did stage his own disappearance, he would have had to use funds that he had somewhere else and not that credit card. Now, taking into consideration the skill and resourcefulness to pull off such a feat, it is extremely unlikely that Rico would have faked a mental collapse in the video and purposely left the backpack behind. Like I said at the beginning of this theory, the idea that he staged his disappearance and escaped is highly, highly implausible. Kind of a hybrid theory in this case would be it's a lot more likely that Rico continued down this relapse angle or avenue, and as a result of maybe some self-inflicted torment over the conversation with his mom not going the way he wanted to, and the fact that he was extremely exhausted, it was just a deadly combination. He finds himself alone. Nobody's checking on him, and that's just what he wanted. He gets to the wilderness after making a wrong turn, kind of wanders off into the wilderness a little bit, and could have possibly just succumbed to the elements. All of his life, Rico dealt with the absence of a caring and nurturing father, and that's what he was ultimately seeking. Despite the physical and verbal abuse he endured in his youth, he still sought his father's approval. After he and his siblings moved in with his mother, Rico never really broke off that relationship with his dad, Henry, because deep down he wanted his father's approval. When his basketball career fizzles out, unfortunately he turned to drugs and alcohol. To make matters even worse, Rico, in an odd twist of fate, would run into his own father in jail after he was arrested for public intoxication. You're down and out, your career's over, your dreams are shattered, you're spiraling out of control. Your dad's played a huge role in this from your standpoint. You get arrested for public intoxication, you get to the drunk tank, and who do you see? The son of a bitch that's made all your problems. So that could have even further exasperated this whole situation mentally. Now, a lot of these humiliations and conflicts were self-perceived, but that has no less bearing on the fact that it was real to Rico, and it took a huge psychological toll on him. He was exhibiting signs of depression, anxiety, and possibly even an undiagnosed bipolar disorder. So if you take a history of mental troubles into consideration, a relapse into substance abuse, this discombobulated family setting that he has, all of this would have put Rico in a very dark place on his drive back to Seattle. After his attempts to find closure with his mom didn't pan out, this would have created not only a lot of mental anguish, but it would have created a huge heartache for him. After staying awake for more than 2 consecutive days, the emotional instability caught up with Rico, and he ventured from his deviated course back to Seattle. So as he's driving back there, he probably mistakenly takes a wrong turn, which took him into the mountains of northern Sacramento and eventually into Rumsey Canyon. Between the stop for gas in Lodi and parking in the lower side of the Cache Creek Park, Rico could, somewhere along the lines, sought out some substances to ease his pain and his heartache. Now, it's not difficult to procure any type of substances, of the illegal nature in a major city like Sacramento or the surrounding suburbs. Being a former addict, he would have known, where to look, what to kind of ask for without kind of tipping his hand. So after he parked, Rico could have consumed some illicit items and found that he just got a bad experience. Now, people point to his 2 days without sleep as a possibility that he could have either been on crack cocaine or methamphetamines during his trip to see his mother. Because remember, she stated she felt like he was under the influence of something. Both of those drugs would keep him up for days. So that's a drug angle. The drug angle comes from also some clues that were found in his Maxima when police start investigating it when they tow it back to the station. What they would find under the glove compartment and below the passenger seat was plastic wrap, they stated, that was specifically used for drugs. And they refer to it as a bindle. And this bindle was empty and contained no residue or drug paraphernalia. But this hinted to authorities that a recent substance use had occurred. There was also 2 bottles of alcohol found in the car, one empty and the other half full, also believed to have been consumed by Rico. It has been theorized that after the car ran out of gas and the battery went dead, Rico wanders off from the parking lot down the guardrail of the highway. Eventually, he sets his backpack with his cell phone in it on the curb, decides to walk down to the creek to get a drink of water and to cool off. This tracks because there's a lot of very large human footprints that were found days later by the search team showing that he had walked that way. After spending time at the creek, Rico found an easier way up the hill back to Route 16, but combined with either the severe exhaustion or being under the influence, he can't find his backpack. He's in a different place, and he is all discombobulated. While continuing to walk along Route 16, Rico was able to hitchhike and find a small town or establishment. This is another theory where he could have, kind of sobered up, found something to eat, and then a lot of people try, but not try. I guess you could say try and tie. But a lot of people tied that a couple of drifters in Clear Lake, California, said they recognized Rico buying drugs in the area once, but they didn't have any details or further information regarding him or where he went when he bought the drugs. The movements of Rico in the preceding weeks is a complete mystery, but somehow he avoids eyewitness, scrutiny, I guess. Eventually, this is so weird. This is just this is someone that's done their due diligence when they, trying to come up with their own theory. So this is that hybrid theory still. So they're saying that he's made it into town. He's sobered up, got something to eat, comes to his senses a little bit, maybe get some rest. So you have the next week, he avoids anyone seeing him, somehow returns to the lower side of Rumsey Canyon where his car was parked when he left it on the 19th. It was this night when someone reported seeing a large African-American male walking in that direction. Police later confirmed that this was true because of some more footprints in the immediate area. Now, he could have gotten a ride back to the parking lot where he left his car only to discover that it's not there. And he either went back to the vehicle that dropped him off or decided, fuck it, I'm going to stick out here, and started just walking in the wilderness. What happens afterwards, no one's really come up with. Again, I go back to Rico's hard to miss. He's not going to just blend in to his surroundings or a small town. He's 6'8", 300-pound professional athlete. It's not like they're going to be like, yeah, man, we got those in here all the time. He looks familiar, but, there's 10 or 12 6'8", 300-pound black men walking around. No, I don't get it. While it's plausible, I don't think that theory is likely. Now, it is plausible that Rico could have tripped and when he left his car initially, and it could have been that he just walked into the wilderness a little bit to relieve himself and trips and suffers a mortal wound, finds himself in the bottom of the canyon, maybe in the bottom of a ravine, or even possibly in a sinkhole. That would explain why search and rescue didn't find him. Unfortunately, another angle that we have to consider is he was in a dark place, and suicide is a possibility. He could have just walked off into the forest and purposefully made sure that he didn't walk out. What we do know for certain was that Rico was dealing with a lot of issues that most of us can't fathom. Whether it was lack of sleep, about a depression that was triggered from the conversation with his mom, or a combination of all of that with his anxiety, relapse in drug use, Rico wasn't in his normal state of mind. His activity in his cell phone videos proves that. He was not very aware of his surroundings, and unfortunately, that led investigators in the case to state that he was showing signs of unpredictable behavior. Now, the Harris family and his close friends have often talked about his history with drugs and addiction, and they feel like that's just an unjust stigmatization of his character, and it's undermined this whole case and the public perception of him as a human being. I want to be crystal clear. Rico's struggles with substances does not take away from the fact that he was, from all accounts, a compassionate and caring person. He was also someone's son, someone's brother, and someone's fiance. He deserves just as much attention as any missing person, and he is no more a bad guy than you or me. Addiction is a disease of the mind and the body, and it can create mayhem both physically and emotionally. Those who struggle with addiction battle not only their own sickness, but the constant shame of society, family, friends, and those people who categorize addictive people as failures or worse, less than human. At the end of the day, a man's missing. His family, his friends, his fiance, they miss him. They are trying to find him. So if you have any information about this case, please contact the Yolo County Sheriff's Department. You know, it just, what he was going through breaks my heart. I can't say that I, sympathize, empathize. One of those with him. I've not gone through what he's gone through, but I know people that have gone through things like that. I know some things that have triggered people turning back to substance abuse and battling mental problems along with that. Does not make them any less human. And at the end of the day, that's somebody's baby. So again, if you got any information, please reach out to the Yolo County Sheriff's Department. It's sad. It really is. When you get down to it, it's just, he was a broken man running on fumes that night, thought by going to see his mama that he's going to get I'm going to talk to mom. I'm going to get some closure. I'm going to air my dirty laundry, get it off my chest. Whatever was said, I guess he hadn't thought of what could have been said in that regards, and it kind of just derailed the whole situation. And instead of getting out of there, I understand getting out of there that night. I really do. Like, you don't want to you've put all your eggs in this basket and you emotionally invested, and you just verbally and emotionally vomit all over your mom, and then it doesn't go the way you want to, and you're like, fuck that, I'm not spending the night here. Hindsight being 2020, he should have just found a hotel room, called Jennifer and said, look, I'm exhausted, I'm going to crash here and I'll head back in the morning. But he doesn't. So, it's awful. It really is. As for a recommendation this week, I'm going to recommend on Netflix the new series American Primeval. Pretty good. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not checked out our Patreon page, please do so. You can now gift memberships to our Patreon page. Remember that you have to go to patreon.com/mysteriousbrews. That is the easiest way to get to our page. Also keeps you from having some kind of other fee that Apple is now, I guess, charging people if you go through the Apple Pod. I don't know how that works, but it's out there. So basically, if you're wanting to be a patron and or share our Patreon page with people, their subscriptions, just go to patreon.com/mysteriousbrews. That way there's no middleman, I guess is the best way to put it. I did see where taxes are going to be introduced, I think, this year. However, the deal, if you pay for a whole year up front, they are giving you, I think, 2 months free. So I'm not trying to tell you that. I mean, because, hell, it's easier to pay $3 a month than it is sometimes $30 up front. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got to say. So y'all have a good one. Let's keep coaching our thoughts. Hope he makes a speedy recovery, and deuces.